I'm going to start recording now.
Sure.
All right.
I will start sharing.
It's all you, Yi.
That looks different. Everyone can see. Interesting. Okay, so I wasn't going to do slides, but then someone made me do slides yesterday. So this is as good as it gets in a couple hours. I think everyone here is familiar with Flytetkit and its concept, actually, so I'm not going to go too much into the background, but basically this is what it looks like currently up top. I didn't include launch plans in here, but it shouldn't be too much different. So going over tasks and workflows, and then just showing some of the differences and why we didn't like the old style, I guess. So the old style of stuff of declaring tasks, if you look at it, like it's a lot more heavy-handed. So this is not, I don't want to indict the original Flytetkit, the current Flytetkit. It was written for a different era, and by a different era I mean Python 2, which is not typed, and so it necessarily has a lot more cruft to it. When you bring in native Python 3 typing, obviously things will simplify a lot. So this is our effort to do that. So this is the old one. Some of the things we didn't like about it: lots of weird imports. You had to take a parameter in the front to get access to Flytetkit utilities, like logging and stats. And the unit test was a little bit strange because you had to call a specific unit test function that ended up just calling the original function. So in the new one, we've made our best effort to keep the task as a task. One of our guiding principles was that we should be able to step completely out of the way and let the user just have at his or her original Python function. So if you just run T2 here, like it just runs the function. We're also auto naming a lot of things. So inputs you have to name, outputs will just be named according to some pattern that increments with the generator. So out _0 up to n-1 or whatever. Or if you want to, I don't have an example on this slide, but if you want to name it, you can use a typing.named tuple, which will allow you to both specify the names and as well as the inner types. And yeah, that should be it. Differences in the workflows. The biggest change is that previously workflows were classes. Now we have made them functions. We've made them functions primarily because we wanted a way to unit test workflows themselves. And the loading of classes tends to happen once when the module is loaded, and you can't really control how often it is rerun effectively with different inputs. These inputs are also a little bit, because they have to be class static variables, they look a little bit strange. They're declared like this in line. And one of the other downsides, I guess I didn't mention, is you can't have like this. You have to assign it to a variable, otherwise it won't get picked up in the class dictionary. So in the new one, we've made it a, Keithan added this. We've made it a function. Functions can take defaults, and the return type, it follows the same thing. If you can use a named tuple, or you cannot use a named tuple, and we'll just auto generate a default name for you. Instead of handling nodes, so TK1 here is a quote unquote node, the outputs of which you access like so. In the new style, what you get back are the actual, like in Python, the actual values themselves. In local execution, it's not quite actually the values, because we want to support patterns like this. Request equals whatever. right? Stuff like that. But they are, when you just run the mywf as a Python function, everything should still just work, which is, again, one of our goals. And yeah, so this just means Python can be our engine, because Python will do things in the correct order naturally, rather than having to understand node structure and write like a mini propeller inside Python. This is something that we're still working on. So this is not yet implemented in the sense that we don't have an end-to-end example running, but we're also still debating the merits of this and maybe a couple other user experiences, like syntax, effectively. So the old style dynamic tasks, you yield things, and then you set the outputs in the same format. The new one, hopefully it's a little bit easier to reason about. It still generates effectively a workflow, a sub workflow, but we've, I guess, kind of hidden that from the user. And we suspect this is a cleaner interface for users to reason about. And again, this works in local execution. So just roughly, as these were the goals that we're kind of working with. Well, a subset of the goals. This is just what I came up with. Local workflow execution, we've covered that. Reduce barriers to entry. So like if a properly annotated Python 3 module should be very, very easy to convert to Flyte tasks and workflows. Tasks, at least, workflows will take some, like you have to know what a workflow is and the limitations around it. Extensibility. So we found that the plugin development cycle for the existing Flytetkit was a little bit too onerous for new contributors, and we wanted to make sure it was easy to extend. And more broadly, we wanted to make sure that it was easy for contributors to contribute to the code base at large. I, for one, found the current Flytetkit to be very confusing, partly, again, just because it has to be to compensate for the lack of typing in Python 2. And the goal with all of this is hopefully that the new tasks will work with the old style classes. That's going to be like a shim layer in between. Something I think like 2 levels of decorating, effectively. You decorate, like you have like the normal, I think, a new style of Python task, and then you decorate that again with just to convert it to like the old style that uses the old SDK types and values and can interact with the old style classes. And then there's some question there about whether or not sub workflows and stuff would be able to be translated as well, possibly. We have some of the simple examples running on. Let me show you the code first. So if you can take a look at one of the goals also with our alpha release, which I'm not sure when it's coming, but we are going to rewrite or write alongside the existing cookbook all the examples in the new style, just so users have a reference for how to translate it and how things might work in the new style. And these are just currently some examples, basic tasks we have running, basic workflows, slightly more complicated workflows that use, I mean, I think Gleb, this is something that you were complaining about not quite seeing. So this does the binding collection thing, and sub workflows. So I think the UI is still a little bit finicky on sub workflows, which is where, yes, okay, so this is one of the things that we had to do because we still haven't resolved the node name conflict. So because all our nodes are auto-generated, this would produce a node -0, and this would also produce a node -0. So those two were in conflict, so you had to override the name. But I think the graph doesn't quite look right because one of the nodes is missing, but the sub workflows are here. So this is where we're at right now. And I think I'll let Keithan give a timeline estimate on when we think an alpha might be ready.
Yeah, I think so. Our goal is, as you mentioned, is to most importantly simplify users' development cycle, and we are doing that in three ways. One of them is essentially reducing the cognitive overhead that you have when you're using Flyte in the SDK itself. So that's one of the things that you showed, that you just import one thing. Every task type is the same at task decorator. That's it. We automatically understand using strings or types of parameters that you pass to the decorator. Based on that, we will figure out the type of task and so on. So from the user's point of view, it should be very straightforward to get started with. Secondly, the user should be able to run it completely locally. Now, there are caveats over there. What if you're interacting with a Hive or a Presto or a BigQuery table? Running that locally may mean you have to have the capability of actually querying those tables. So in those cases, we want to support complete mockability. So Flyte, the default implementation just prints the query and says, hey, this is the expected query, how it will look, but it doesn't do the output automatically. So it would be the users will have a hook where they can just say, hey, in case you call this method or this task, here's the output. Now they could also write actually a plugin on their side only that allows them to query BigQuery, for example, but we don't want to take onto that because there are security considerations, there are maintenance overhead for such things, because these are libraries, right? Like we have to fix them all the time, make sure things work. So it doesn't work really well with the Flyte model of like having continuous extensibility and flexibility in the backend. But it does give the user the capability of having sample data sets and running the end-to-end flow locally. The third thing that we intend to achieve with this is that the contributors, and these are contributors who probably don't know Go, don't want to extend the backend, just want to write things in Python, allow the many of the existing frameworks out there. They should be able to do it like very Airflow-esque style. Simply extend a class, write one method, and you're done. And that's the capability that this SDK already brings. So these are the three prime goals that we want to get to. I want to say we are very close to achieving those goals in the style that we have implemented the code in. One of the things that we have to do is feature complete. But for alpha, we may not be 100% feature complete. We may be 90% or 80% feature complete. But along with that, we will have to make sure that you are able to interact with the older workflows, like older tasks and new tasks together. So together, I think that might take up to a month or more from now to get that alpha out. It might be less, but I want to say a month. And besides that, the next part that we are tackling, which is independent of this track, is to reduce the total iteration time from the time of writing code to getting it running on remote. And hopefully Katrina will demo that next time when we meet. And that basically, the idea is to reduce that time to less than 5 seconds, or even lower. So, but that's the goal that we are going with. So together, I think that one might land earlier. So keep your lookout for that, and definitely attend the next meeting to understand how that's going to work. This one will follow up, and together we feel that they will empower the Python developer to to essentially just use Flytekit and not even use Flyte backend and still get benefits out of it, like use automatic pandas data conversion and so on, like without even needing anything from Flyte backend. And then Flyte backend is the additional stuff. So that's the goal. Rough timeline, alpha a month maybe, and we believe that we'll have this stable and ready to go by end of the year. And does that sound okay?
Yeah, and hopefully once, like, it's not the cleanest code right now. There's definitely some spots that we, just in the process of iterating, we've let get out of hand. Once we clean up everything and have an established framework, I think we can also cut smaller issues for people in the open source community to work on if they want to.
Yeah, I think we'll start a project in GitHub, which will be managed with multiple tasks. And the layout will be straightforward with unit tests and so on. So contributions welcome. And this, I think, in my opinion, this is one of the most effective changes that we can do to help Flyte and our users. And so we are heavily focused on this, and we will continue working on this.
And sorry, one last comment. If anyone sees anything that is obviously wrong or we've gotten something terribly wrong, please pipe up.
Jeev had a couple of questions in the chat. You want to take a look at that?
Oh, how do we look at that? Yeah, there it is.
How do you look at chats?
Yeah. Jeev has a question. What about the access to the no, the WF params are not phased out. I removed it from Ye's slide. I just wanted to show the brevity of the new syntax. But essentially it is Flytekit that get context, like Spark or other things. It's a global singleton that you get access to in the process. Jeev, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And then the yield generators for dynamic. No more yield, most likely, because the problem with yield is in Python, the idea is that you will return back to that point once the yield has completed, which is not the case with dynamic. Dynamic yields in a traditional sense, where it completely gives up like a sense of things to execute. It's like a planner that gives out a plan, and that's it. And then the plan executes, and Flyte Propeller essentially tries to assemble the results back. So we think it's actually a break in the mental model, the yield, and that's why we are getting rid of it. No more yield. They will figure out a nicer way, but right now it's like writing a workflow essentially, and that's what it is. Like in the runtime, a dynamic task is essentially a workflow compilation with inputs that are bound, because we know the inputs at runtime. And that's what it's becoming, where you bind the inputs to the workflow and it generates the actual workflow. So you can interact with the inputs, but you can't interact with the intermediates because the intermediates are still promises. They are not complete. What do sidecar tasks look like? Would that just be updated? Yep. Yes. So sidecar should be no different. It should be exactly how it is today, with, of course, addition of part spec that you can do in the YAML. But yeah, the .with overrides is going to be a generic standardized thing for every single task type. So I wanted to add a brief comment on the with overrides. So the idea is that you write a task and you think that it needs 1 GPU, but maybe based on the data set, you think that you need 2 GPUs. I don't think GPUs is a good example here, but 2 CPUs. You can just say with overrides only within the context of the workflow. As a follow-up, we are working on, and this actually needs a UI update, is overriding these parameters like CPU, GPU at runtime for an execution, because we've seen our users essentially have that problem where they're like, hey, I'm running an execution and I want to update the cache. I don't want to use the cache, or I want to increase the CPU for this specific task for this run because my previous task failed because of overriding memory or because of memory pressure or something. So you can change the memory for this execution. So that's that's a separate track too. But they are all going in the same direction. The with override semantics and the config overrides. Eventually, we'll actually hopefully share that also in a bit. They're all going in that same direction. But any other questions?
Just a comment. I think this is great. It's so much cleaner and much easier to even read.
Yeah, exactly. Trust us. Yeah. When we started, when we look at it, sometimes we're like, "Oh, what were we thinking?" But you know. And contributions welcome. If anybody, I don't want to say we are the best Python programmers. There are many better Python programmers out there who can really, really help us, make this even better. So please contribute or at least ideas. If you see something terribly wrong, what we'll do is we'll probably share out these examples in the email list and so on. Please contribute and say like, hey, this could be improved. And maybe in alpha, we can do that as an alpha.
I have a question about the types now that we use. That you have like proper Python types. What about things like, let's say you have a schema, for instance? How is this now represented?
Yes, great question. I think we kind of skipped that in the presentation, right? So these are the types that we are handling. All the Python native types are easy to represent, binary, string, even. Then the next level of types are IO types, like string IO, buffer, and things like that, right? And those are represented as blobs in the backend. But we also have a file-like object, and that we will have to create. Like we will be exposing something like types.file or types.directory. File becomes again a blob. Directory becomes a multi-part blob because that's what it is. It's not a recursive directory; it's a single layer directory, but we could eventually start supporting recursive directories. And schema is essentially a pandas data frame, a Spark data set, or a Wakes data frame, any of these data frames that are out there. But the schema is loose at the moment, right? It's not very easy to extract the schema from the data frames themselves. So at least I don't know of, and if you guys know that better. So we were thinking we'll actually keep on supporting Flyte.schema, which translates to one of these data frames. And the way the translation happens is not automatic like the way it is today, where you say schema.download and schema.get data frame. Instead of that, you will say, I have a helper method that says from schema to pandas data frame, or from schema to Spark RDD, or not RDD data set, or from schema to Wakes data frame, any of those. Does that answer your question? Sorry. Like
Yeah,
we'll have to represent schema somehow. Yeah, we're not taking away the support for it. That's that fear was there. Yeah.
Maybe a similar thing like the container types. Now that we have like proper typing, I guess it would be possible to actually support like list of string whatever and things like that, and really put that into the type system, right?
Oh yeah, we are. So actually, that's an interesting. Actually, Gleb had this interesting question some time ago, where our type system is univariate, but the actual protobuf seems to be like multivariate. But we don't expose multivariation, right? Because I think that's kind of runtime complexity. Eventually, we might want to optimize things, right? So it's all univariate at a higher level, and I think so. Today we already support types.list of a specific type, but with Python, it's going to be much simple. You will just say typing.list and int or typing.list int, and that will be a list of integers. Yep. And we will continue.
Awesome.
Yep.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, and Gleb and Nelson in the Java SDK, are you guys also supporting univariate lists and things like that? What is that?
So right now we are working on extending serialization code, but yeah, it will generalize it. It will serialize it to structs and proto for now.
Okay. Oh, so you're just using struct for lists and things like that. Okay. Yeah. Eventually, but you could support, because the benefit of lists is that the UI can be generated to be just lists. Like that's really the benefit. And I think yesterday somebody in the general channel was asking, yeah, I want to pass in a list of lists in the UI, and we don't support that because the UI is a little behind as usual. So it will support it. So. Anything else? Great question. Sorry, I think schema is not gone. It's one of the heavily used types at Lyft, and we cannot get rid of it even if you want to. So. Any other question? I can give a quick update on Milestone 9 if there's nothing else. But yeah, George, you had something.
No, I'm just going to wrap up if there's nothing else to do. But if you have one more, go for it.
Yeah, it's just an update on the Milestone 9. I think we decided to keep on talking about what we're working on. So as we already showed Flytetkit improvement, right? That's in progress. Dynamic array jobs. So if I think some of you are using array jobs on Kubernetes, and if you see actually the array jobs in Kubernetes have a problem where if you launch tens of thousands of them, they affect Kubernetes. So we've been working on a way to really launch large numbers of arrays in Kubernetes, and that's merged. We are testing it at scale internally at Lyft. So we ourselves use AWS Batch to do the array jobs, but we are migrating away from AWS Batch because we've seen stability issues with Batch. And so we are testing it for our internal users. It's merged in mainline, but as we find any stability issues, we'll fix them. We're hoping that at the end of this month or early next month or mid next month, we will have a stable version for all of this. UI improvements, yeah, single task launch UI is in. So you can now launch a single task right from the UI. And the eventual goal is when something fails in a workflow, right, you can launch that specific failing task with modified parameters if you want to quickly test out your hypothesis or so on. So the end story, the flow in the UI is getting more stabilized. Blob rendering support is not done yet, and waterfall UI is in progress. Vrinda is working on log plugins, and thank you again for it. And
yeah, of course. It's been a little slow, I'm sorry, but this is my first time with Go too, so
that's awesome.
It's fun to do. Yeah.
Yeah, Go is a fun language. It's like I started off not liking it much, but I'm like,
yeah, it's pretty clean.
It's very simple. It's like that's what the cool part is. And then Katrina is working on the fast iteration. I think we'll have a demo for it next time. And yeah, and then Flytectl, Uraj or Eval socket has been chugging along on it, and I have also been helping with it. It's coming along. It's a side project, so whenever we get a chance, we work on it. And one last thing is I have a talk tomorrow at Global AI Conference. But it's more of a business talk about like things, why we should consider things like Flyte in an organization. So yeah, if you guys, I can share a speaker code that you guys can come to. And if you guys want to, please go ahead and talk about Flyte. And if you're liking it, definitely post it. We'll appreciate that. Thank you. That's it from mine. Hey, Nelson and Gleb, do you guys want to give an update if you want?
So 4 weeks left before we demo dynamic workflows. And also we have some iteration on testing support, like a testing for workflows. So you can test on not only tasks, but workflows locally.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, same thing. I think both of the Python and Java Flytetkit are now kind of hopefully aligning on the same path. So that's awesome. Also with the faster iteration, it'll look even more similar. That's awesome. 4 weeks for the dynamic workflow. I'm excited.
I think that's it then. Unless there are any more questions, we'll wrap it up and we'll try to get the video and the notes posted a little more timely today, and then see everybody again in 2 weeks, and maybe Katrina will have something to show us if we're lucky about faster iteration time. Is that it?
Yep.
All right. Going, gone, everybody. Nice to see y'all. Everybody stay safe.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.
See you, G. Bye.
All right.